Welcome to Racers Trackside Report from the Indianapolis 500. Robin Miller, I thought you were going to announce your retirement today after Marco Andretti earned his first pole position for the Indy 500. This is something you've been talking about, dreaming about for at least a decade that I can recall hearing. We still got you, so you haven't retired, but this scenario of the Andretti name riding high, hopefully between now and race day in the media, this is the ultimate scenario you've been hoping for. If you could go one better and win next Sunday, I think your retirement party's official.
Well, Marshall, the thing of it is you and I both know, if you get Andretti, and I just did a column about Andretti and Graham when they were in the front row at Milwaukee in 2008, and you're thinking these guys are going to be, they're the future of this thing, and they're going to be kicking ass and taking names for the next 20 years, battling for championships in Indy 500. If you keep those two kids in the headlines, we're going to get all the newspapers that don't care about racing to probably maybe run a story, or the sportscast at 11 o'clock that goes, oh, Andretti, sure, we've heard of him. Yeah, he's on the pole at Indy. Maybe even ESPN will use something on it. So I think the most important thing is it's not only good for Marco and his confidence and the fact that he struggled so much in the last 2 or 3 years. It's great for his family, but it's really good for IndyCar racing because that's what we need. We someone that's got a recognizable name that generates. I mean, it would have been, I don't know how many people could have been here today. Maybe they'd had 10,000 or something like that. But I think it would have been a pretty popular decision when he won the pole position, especially the way he won it. And there was about 50 people sitting outside of turn 2 in the parking lot, and they were all going crazy. So it's a shame that there was nobody here to see it because it was pretty dramatic.
I sent Marco a text this morning with a link to a song he and I both love from Eric B. and Rakim by the name of Follow the Leader, and said, all right, this is your mission for the day. So he's sticking to the plan there. Before we get to talking about the closing practice, 2.5 hours of crazy drafting battles, Robin, including a crash. Let's talk about the rest of the Fast 9. Andretti Autosport, boy, coming out of yesterday, looked like they were going to own all their cars, going right to the front in the Fast 9. That absolutely was not the case. Graham Rahal, the Rahal Letterman Lanigan team himself, and Takuma Sato, they certainly didn't appear to be super happy in the high winds. Tell us about this Fast 9 session and how it didn't necessarily pan out the way we thought. Plus, there's this VK kid, what, 200ths, less than 200ths of a second off of being on the front row. More unpredictability, my friend.
Well, I think, Marshall, the thing that's interesting is that we figured Dixon was going to be first or second. He was going to be certainly in the front row, especially just his pedigree and his experience and the way he drives around this place. And to lose the third closest battle for the pole in the history of the Speedway, I mean, that was pretty dramatic. And Marco had to have 4 perfect laps, and he put them together. Sato did a hell of a job. He had 4 laps over 2:30. He went out first, and that thing held up, and he ends up in the front row. You talked to Rinus VK and did a story on him. I mean, this kid is between him and Alex Palou, they're unflappable. It's just like, yeah, we're going 237 into turn 1. That was kind of cool, They've never been on an oval. I mean, okay, VK's been here in the Indy Lights car, but I mean, those guys. I just think it's amazing. People say, well, it's smooth and cars are easy to drive. Well, cars aren't easy to drive, and you can. I wish people at home could see how these guys, when these things start sliding like Ryan Hunter-Reay's car, you could see that it's a handful. And to run into a corner at 238 to 240 miles an hour, I think VK had the fastest straightaway speed going into 240. I mean, he's one hell of a story, and so is Palou. And Marco, Michael Andretti and Mario said the same thing. They said after Hinch, Rossi and Hunter-Reay flamed out, they figured it was all over. They weren't even going to be in the front row. They didn't have a chance. So Marco not only saved the day for Andretti Autosport, he pretty much pumped up their whole team. And I think when he came into pits, and everybody, not just his teammates, Dixon and Sato and all these guys ran down there and high-fived him and hugged him. And I think he's a very popular guy among the drivers, and a lot of people don't know him. They think he's aloof and all that. He's just quiet. But I think a lot of people are pulling for him because they know how hard it's been the last 4 or 5 years with no results. Hadn't won a race in, 9 years. So, again, it's just a really good story that IndyCar could use and could need, especially when you don't have any fans and there hasn't been a lot of media here yet. But maybe this is the kind of thing that'll get people to say, hey, let's see if Indy will give us a credential. We'll come cover Marco. But other than that, probably Rossi might have been the biggest surprise that he's ninth, because you would have figured, he was going to be a challenger for the pole, but he had a handful. And Graham, I think Graham spooked himself so bad in the win this morning. I think that's the thing about Sato that amazes me. He's 43 years old, and he's as brave now as he was when he was 23, and nothing seems to faze him. So, hell of a job for Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, and Andretti, and Ed Carpenter, and of course Ganassi. But Honda pretty much put their stamp on things, and at least for qualifying. Now we'll see what happens in the race.
Picking up on a couple other things you mentioned there, Robin. Alex Pillow's engineer texted me shortly after the Fast 9 to say that their weight jacker decided to not jack weight. So there was certainly more speed that would have been available for Alex had all the tools been working inside the car. Big fan of the front row in terms of race engineers. Garrett Mothershed, who's just so respected within Gasoline Alley. Second place with Scott Dixon. Michael Cannon has to be his best ever Indy 500 qualifying. And then on the outside of the front row, Eddie Jones, the ageless Eddie Jones with Takuma Sato. So awesome to see three, delightful human beings, also top of their craft in terms of engineers. You mentioned Marco and all the drivers showing him love. Again, to the public that maybe doesn't know Marco or can only gets a glimpse of who he is through broadcasts and such, he is among the one or two most loved drivers among all the drivers.
Yep.
And knowing their personalities, Robin, not all the drivers are the friendliest or, really want to give a darn about their fellow rival. You look at the Penske team jumping up and down when Marco was on pole. It just tells you some of the hardest guys in the paddock were actually cheering for Marco and his achievement. It's a great insight into what kind of rapport he has and what kind of character he has when you've got some stone-cold killers actually celebrating for him to get the pole.
When I saw that, Marshall, I thought, are they cheering because Dixon and Ganassi didn't win, or are they cheering because they like Marco? And I think you're right. I think it's because they have a lot of respect for the Andretti family, and they were happy for Marco.
Robin, let's pivot to, call it final normal practice. We're going to have carb day on Friday, 2 more hours of running. It gets to be really busy, though, because it's all 33 cars on pit lane at the same time. Pit stop practice going on. It's a really cramped, busy thing. This final practice, the one we normally have on Monday, but now it's actually end of qualifying today, this was pretty ragged. We saw 3 and 4 wide, seemingly 3 and 4 deep at times. Cars all over the place, some crazy stuff. What does Scott Dixon do? He crashes. We're thinking, well, they're done. Won't see him till carb day. No, they get back out with whatever, half hour, 45 minutes left. And what does he do? He goes to the top 3. Helio Castroneves put in a corker of a lap and a toe to run P2. And then there's this guy we might have opened the show talking about, Marco Andretti, shoots to, why not? Just lead everything, Marco. This has been a crazy day, Robin. Talk about practice as you watched it. We obviously know some of the ones who jumped up. Santino Ferrucci had a really good toe, so good for him. We know his car should, if we have some wind on Sunday, he should be in good shape. Tell us about practice and maybe some of the teams that we're still surprised were lagging a little bit.
Well, I thought Connor Daly was very impressive in practice. Ed Carpenter finally was up there running pretty good. So you got to figure they're going to be heard from on race day. Colton Herta looks really good. He's another guy we haven't talked a lot about, but he looks really good in traffic. So probably, other than Elio jumping up there, Will Power and Joseph Newgarden and Pagano weren't really, nobody paid a lot of attention to them today. They didn't make any headlines, or people didn't I know Townsend Bell keeps saying on the NBC, boy, Pagano's so good in traffic. I don't know if he still feels that way. Maybe he does. But you hear the Chevrolet guys saying, okay, we got our butt kicked in qualifying, but these things are really raceable. So what do you think? You think that's probably going to be true, that the Chevys, it ought to be a hell of a race. And the thing that makes me crazy is some of these drivers keep saying, well, it's going to be tough to pass. There were 8,000 passes in 2.5 hours. I mean, I'm watching it like this because, I mean, it's because if anybody ever spins in front of that thing, they're going to take out 20 cars. I mean, it was as good as some of the races were. So I think it's going to be a hell of a race, and I think guys are going to be able to pass. I don't know why they keep saying that. Do you think?
Well, there is something to it, Robin, because what we saw today, in some instances, you had cars that left the pits at the same time, possibly on similar tires in terms of age and how much lifespan was left in them. But we also had a lot of situations where you'd have some going out on new or newish tires, and they'd be able to blow by some folks that had been on a 20 or 30 lap run whose tires were worn out, and vice versa. So once we get into the race proper, where everyone's going to be starting on basically the same tires, I think that's the part where there's concern. When everyone is on more or less same fuel, same tires, we've heard, despite what we saw on Wednesday, where there are some positive comments from drivers saying, yeah, I think we can tow up and pass. As the days have gone by, it's been pretty consistent with folks saying, yeah, it's actually harder to pierce through that aerodynamic bubble and get ahead than it was last year without the aero screen. So when everyone's matchy, same stuff, that's where we're not seeing a ton of passing going on. Let's talk about Fast 9 with the Rahal Letterman Lanigan team, Graham and Rahal there. Then we come into practice today, the end of the day, and those two guys really weren't particularly anywhere. Their teammate, though, the constant surprise, Spencer Pigot, led the three of them. Fernando Alonso was quick, kind of, sort of, finally. This bouncing ball, man. I mean, I've had folks, I'm sure you've had folks ask, hey, who's going to win? I don't know. Good
No.
Lord. This is a crazy year to predict.
No way to tell. Hey, I was going to ask you, what about, somebody said earlier today, might have been Paul Tracy or Townsend Bell on the Tuckcast, that with the aero screen, maybe you don't want to lead because you got to push so much air and it's going to hurt your fuel mileage, and you want to sit behind the leader. Does that make sense?
100%. 100%. If you're the first one with that big fishbowl, as I call it, if you're the first one in line with that big fishbowl, well, you're having to crack open the air for those behind you. It takes more power and energy if you're having to either do it on your own, or if you're the first in line doing that. So, yeah, to their point, it's the same thing if we're watching the Daytona 500. The person that's leading is the one that's having to crack the air open. They're having to burn more fuel to do that. Those that sit behind, those are the ones that tend to benefit. So there's a little something to that for sure. Might be a new area of strategy taken to a deeper place. I mean, obviously, the lead car is always doing that in any big super speedway race in particular, but it seems like the aero screen's just adding another level to that concern in terms of consuming fuel, but also just the work having to do that as well. So could we see a scenario if their teammates running 1, 2, 3, where they actually try and trade? Maybe. But yeah, I think we might see an interesting scenario, Robin, where it's going to be the who wants to lead, who doesn't want to lead. Nobody wants to lead. Okay, well, how do you do that for 499 miles at least? So it's a variable for us to watch for sure. Robin, let's talk about going into a number of days of silence now. Nothing happening on track. We are not going to have pit stop competition. Freedom 100's not here. All kinds of things that we're accustomed to between the end of qualifying and practice and carb day. What are you going to do? You're going to go get a tan? You're going to go surfing? What's happening?
I'm going to do the mailbag. I'm going to go to AJ Foyt's winery on Tuesday and sit down with him and do a sit down for NBC. I'm going to go to the cancer clinic on Wednesday and get blood. Thursday, I don't know. And Friday, I'm coming out here for carb day. But the biggest hole in our whole thing, as you know and I know, is no memorabilia show. So pretty much that almost ruins the race for me not to have the memorabilia show, because you and I usually spend $500 a piece there, and it's the best time of the year because we get to buy all those pictures and all the stuff that we stuff in our closets that nobody ever sees. But so it's just so different. It's so surreal to think that all these things have been. There's no fans, and there's no all the little things, the Legends Day and the autograph sessions and public drivers meeting, and it's gone. So the only redeeming value is I think that it's going to be a kick-ass race.
Why don't we try and set up a Robin Miller appearance at the Working Man's Friend? Get a hamburger, get stories with Uncle Robin. I don't know, maybe some Long's Donuts as well. You can maybe do a Miller's tour, the Gut Bomb tour of Speedway and Indianapolis. I think folks would love that. Marco Andretti on pole. We did. I don't know if we nailed that in our predictions yesterday totally. Are we too crazy to throw out a random prediction for the race that won't stick? Or should we wait until we're done with Carb Day to give folks absolutely meaningless information?
Well, if you pick now, we can always change our mind by Friday or Saturday and look like geniuses. Of course you want to do it now. Then you can always go back on your word.
Well,
I bet on Graham Rahal a couple of weeks ago. He was 25-1, and Marco was 30-1. I don't know. Graham's been running good. I kind of like their chances, but I don't know how you can bet against Scott Dixon, Marshall. I just can't. I can't. I don't. I just think he's going to be tough to beat.
I will go with you. It's not often we come into the Indy 500 and say Dixon looks like he's the man. Obviously, for Marco, it'd be a lovely thing if he could win. But I'm with you right now, provided he doesn't crash again. Dixon's been looking pretty darn strong. I think we need him to win, actually, to save a friend, because his race engineer, Mike Cannon, has been wolfing down about 19 cartons of Marlboros each day to deal with the stress. So just if Dixon actually cares about people, he doesn't. Really, he's just a despicable human being. But if he, for once in his life, were to care about someone else, he would do something so his race engineer can maybe back off the rev limiter with the old Marlboros a little bit.
How cool, Marshall, how cool is Dixon? He gets beat by 0.17 of a second for the pole position and says, I'm really happy for the guy. Marco deserves did a great job. I mean, Dixon's so classy. It's hard to imagine, but he's just that good a human being, and he's that good a race driver. So we probably just jinxed him. Paul Tracy's picked Marco Andretti. So I picked Marco 4 years in a row. And he asked me the fifth year, will you please not pick me anymore? What does that mean?
Here's the thing. PT is almost always correct with his predictions. We'll talk or he'll text about something, and he'll call something months in advance, whatever it is. I'll totally forget about it, and then this text will pop up, told you. So if he's picked Marco, I think we know where the betting line needs to go. Robin Miller, we're going to get in the habit of you sending us home, my friend. So why don't you close the show?
Okay, Marshall. Well, let me just say that the weather has been spectacular here in Indianapolis all week, which figures since we haven't had any fans. No rain. Qualifying was everything we figured it would be, just guys stacked on top of each other. A lot of great stories, good stories from the rookies, great story from the Andretti family, and Honda just really flexing their muscles like you wrote this morning. So now we just got to sit and wait for 4 days, which is kind of, it seems like we got this momentum going, and all of a sudden we got to put the brakes on, and everybody has to kind of chill out. But I think the last 3 or 4 years have been some of the best racing we've seen, and I think we're going to see the same thing a week from today, brother. And thank you, people, for watching Racer.com and for reading Marshall's stories and my stories, and we will talk to you on Friday.